Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Santa Monica KTC's Thursday night Sangha gathering. We're happy to have everyone here with us. I see that there's some new people here this evening as well, so welcome. We have Lama Adam with us, and he will be sharing on the wings of wisdom and compassion this evening. We Santa Monica KTC has a website that you can check out all the everything that's happening. It's santamonica.ktc.com. We'll be making an announcement soon because we will be changing that around a little bit, but everybody will get if you're signed up for our newsletter, you'll see that when in the newsletter. And lastly, if you would like to make a donation to Lama Adam this evening, you can do so by clicking on the link in our newsletter or on our website. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Lama Adam, if everyone could just mute their microphones, and thank you very much.
Thank you. I mentioned a little earlier, I'm just getting over being sick. I'm actually still sick, but I'm feeling a little bit better today. So I'm also house sitting for a friend, so I don't have my usual background or wardrobe. So I apologize for that, but I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see people. I've been hunkered down for the last 2 days, so it's nice to see some family. Tonight is the second talk in a series that I called On the Wings of Wisdom and Compassion, which is a reference to the fact that we need both accumulations, wisdom and merit, compassion, being a synonym here for merit. And this relates to the broader cycle of teachings called Lojong. And generally that's taught in our lineage with the Great Path of Awakening by Jamgon Kongtrul. I'm trying this time around to use a commentary by Trungpa Rinpoche called Training the Mind. And at this point, I don't have the section we're going to talk about today, he doesn't say much about. So I'm going to be leaning pretty heavily on Great Path of Awakening. But last time we did like an overview talk about Lojong and tong-len. And it's okay if this is something that you haven't done before or something that you're interested in starting. This talk will be something that everyone can engage with. But I want to start just with this idea of Dharma as a remedy. Dharma is a lot of times what we talk about as the teachings of the Buddha. Dharma is a Sanskrit word that means like the way things are, how stuff is, how stuff works. So it's a pretty broad word. But in the case of Buddhism, we talk about Buddha Dharma or just Dharma kind of with a capital D, because we're talking about the teachings that relate to lasting happiness and ultimately enlightenment. But don't let that feel, or don't forget that that's very much connected to those everyday things. It's not a separate category. It relates very much to what we do moment to moment in our daily life. That's one of the reasons why when I came to Buddhism, I enjoyed it so much compared to other experiences, because I felt like, wow, I have something to do all week now, not just on Sunday. There's things not just in the morning. I also have traffic and work and eating, and I can do this all the time. So in a way, the idea of like lowercase d dharma and capital D dharma is an illusion. These things are ultimately can be the same, but we need the capital D dharma to help us to raise or make bigger the lowercase d dharma. And so the teachings of the Buddha are a remedy for a situation that is not permanent, is not intrinsic. If our current state of discomfort and suffering and confusion and fear and negative emotions, if all of that was the situation, then it wouldn't really help to have, what am I trying to say? Dharma being a remedy can clear that away. If it was inherent, there's nothing we could do about that. There would be like no remedy if that's who we were. So Dharma is in that way remedial. It remedies a situation that is temporary and has a cause. So the Buddha taught the cause of that discomfort and suffering and all of that is ignorance, and in particular, like fixation on self-identity, like who we think we are, how we think we are as a thing, as opposed to a process. And so thinking of this in terms of remedy, remedies need to be applied when there's a situation that needs to be remedied. They need to be applied at the right time, in the right way, in the right dose. And remedies don't need to be applied when the situation they're designed to remedy is no longer present. So it's an important distinction to note that these teachings are not the end goal in and of themselves. They're what help us to get there. And where we're trying to get is not really separate, at all. It's just obscured by a lot of habits. So I think we got a whiteboard now. So the first section of the Great Path is called The Need for Mind Training. And I want to start just with that because I feel like this is an amazing set of writing here. So the very beginning of the Great Path says, don't even consider the ephemeral happiness that results from birth in the higher realms of gods and men. Although the enlightenment of Shravakas and Prachika Buddhas can be realized, it is not a final nirvana or transcendence of misery. Consequently, we should strive only for the state of completely perfected Buddhahood. And there's a lot of words in there. And if you get this book, the footnotes are absolutely worth the price of admission alone. Needless to say, what we're talking about here is that like we can't get hung up on just making ourselves happy. That's how I would sum it up in this context, is that there's so much more than that. And if we just hang on to making ourselves comfortable and happy, we're inevitably, first of all, making it harder for us to be comfortable, because the more picky we get, about our comfortableness, the less places we can be comfortable and the more dependent we get on external circumstances. And so there is a much broader picture here that brings us into what we call the Mahayana teachings in the three vehicles model of Tibetan Buddhism, which is this idea that we actually want to make all beings happy and end the suffering of all sentient beings. So that's a pretty broad goal. And that's, in a nutshell, what's being expressed here, is that we can't just get hung up on enlightenment for ourselves or happiness for ourselves, because that's not the end of the journey. We've got more to do than that. And he goes on to say, there are no methods to effect this attainment other than those which rely on two forms of meditation: relative bodhicitta, which is training the mind in love and compassion, and ultimate bodhicitta, which is resting evenly in a non-discursive state, free from conceptual elaborations. This, if anyone's not feeling like they totally get this, like, hey, this book is just completely profound and very dense with like really deep thoughts. So this is one of those things that you can read a zillion times. And I would definitely recommend, if you have the opportunity, to go through this with a teacher, because there is so much to be unpacked in each of these sentences. And you'll see there's a lot of footnotes. And when you get to the footnotes, they're paragraphs long in and of themselves. So I would say just keep in mind that like it's totally okay to take teachings like this. I can't remember who said this, but I heard you can think of it like rain, and rain falls and it all of it kind of hits the earth and it goes in, and some of it makes plants grow, some of it doesn't. But the earth doesn't say stop raining on me, so the idea here is that you can just accept, all of this information. Some of it may stick, some of it may not, some of it may months or weeks later click, so I think the idea is just let yourself be open to the information, and we'll leave plenty of time for questions too. So but with this section we just talked about, he referenced relative bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. And bodhicitta means mind of awakening. Bodhi and Buddha both have the same root. which means awake or to be awakened. So when we talk about enlightenment, sometimes we say awakening, as a synonym for that. The idea being that we're no longer asleep or ignorant in that fixation on self-identity. So we're starting to see how that relates now to that broader goal of helping all sentient beings. And we talk about relative bodhicitta, which is training the mind in love and compassion, and ultimate bodhicitta, which is resting evenly in a non-discursive state, non-discursive meaning like chatty, jumping one place to another. So resting evenly in a non-discursive state, free from conceptual elaborations, concepts. So bodhicitta is impartial love and compassion. And when we talk about love and compassion, we're talking about loving kindness or love. Jampa is the Tibetan word. We're talking about the wish for all beings to be happy. And I really want to emphasize here that means all, including you. I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls potentially of this kind of a practice is we can forget that side of it, that you're included in the impartial love and the impartial compassion. And if you're not, then it's not, the practice is not perfected. So keep that in mind. Loving kindness, the wish for all beings to be happy. Compassion is the flip side of that coin. It's the wish for all beings to be free from suffering. And I think it's important here to note a little bit about the concept of karma and shifting our karma towards bodhicitta, because we are, as I said, we are enlightenment. Like we are enlightened. It is us. But we are not noticing that. We're forgetting it moment to moment. And bodhicitta is actually inherent. This is not a thing we need to get from somewhere else. We need to cultivate what's already there by clearing away what's obscuring it. So it's our habits of ignorance, fixation on that self-identity, that most often obscure this ever-present potential. So that's a really, really profound point. But it's also, again, very much connected to the low D Dharma, the little d Dharma, in the sense that, how many times a day do we do a thing just because we think that's what we do? How many decisions that we make or things that we say are based on nothing other than the fact that that's what we think we are or how we do things. And so, I mean, this alone is a pretty great day-to-day practice. I've had the good fortune, without even having been involved in Dharma or Buddhism at the time, to do a lot of things that were improv-based or improvisation-based. I played a lot of improvisational music. I did some improvisational comedy. And it's been funny to me coming to Buddhism to realize, like, it took me a long time to realize that was actually related to all of this Buddhism stuff. I mean, in a way, it's kind of an embodied practice of all of this stuff is improvising, So a simple practice that I would offer you here is just simply to try to do things, in a way that you wouldn't normally do them sometimes. It really is that simple, like that's one way to do it, is if you've got one way you go to work, take another way. If you've got a cup you usually use in the morning, use a different cup. If sometimes you drink coffee, maybe try tea one day. These are really simple things that what I notice when I do this is I wake up a little bit. I know I just talked about coffee, but that's not what I mean. But I actually become a little more present, because all of a sudden, number one, I have to think about what I'm doing. Like, it's no longer habit, it's inertia. It's no longer the sleepy kind of ignorant posture of just doing it again, just like I did yesterday. That type of a situation of repetitiveness and mindlessness is the way that we drive home from work and forget the whole drive. That's because we're just in that state of not awake at that time. That doesn't mean we can't do it, but we're just not particularly present for it. So karma is this inertia, this like habit energy. And you know that inertia, once something has some inertia, it takes very little effort for it to keep going or to keep, make it go a little further. And habits require very little thought. And we even know now that there are different networks of the brain that manage novel situations versus repetitive, familiar situations. This is science. So, a big part of what we're doing with Dharma is simply becoming more aware of everything. So, just like we can have impartial compassion that we're trying to cultivate, we're also cultivating impartial awareness. You know, we're actually counteracting habits of getting particularly excited and interesting in one thing and just ignoring and apathetic about another thing. We're trying to even that up and make it all this level of awareness. So we're simply becoming more aware of everything we're doing, both the novel and the repetitive. And with that awareness, we can make the choices that begin to shift our karma. And karma, again, being that habit energy or inertia. And we can shift it in the direction we want to go. And I also want to mention too that like none of this is like monolithic. It's not like our karma is a thing and it's always that. Like moment to moment, we can have different karma. I'm sure anyone here who has some altruism in their heart has had moments where they get ticked off at somebody and then they feel like, oh, I shouldn't be ticked off because they're going through something. And then we justify why we are ticked off because such and such. And so like we have these inner battles between seeming battles between like altruism and selfishness, or ignorance and awakeness, like there's always moment to moment shifting, flickering movement between those two things. So when we talk about like, or when I say like shifting karma, I'm not talking about like, a steady thing that's going this direction. I'm talking about like those flashes, like a little bit more flashes of awake and a little bit less flashes of ignorant and a little bit more flashes of, wishing for the happiness of all beings and a little bit less flashes of feeling like our own happiness can be lost if someone else is happy, or that like if someone else is suffering, then we suffer too, for sure. Like we can start to shift that karma, that inertia, just by shifting the amount of awakened style thoughts from the kinds of thoughts that arise from mindlessness, ignorance, and self-fixation. So impartial loving kindness and compassion includes us. And that's so important to know because a major pitfall of Lojong practice is becoming self-denigrating or masochistic. So we may start a practice like this, and out of the habit of wanting certainty and repetition, which are easy choices, basically. That's another way of saying easy choices is certainty and repetition. We may begin to like default to always putting others before ourselves and putting ourselves lower than others. And we may just start to take that into the world as like the default mindless choice. And that's something we have to watch out for, because if we're searching for bodhicitta, awakened mind, in Buddhahood, awakened person or awakened being, we need to cultivate that presence and awakeness and that freshness in every moment. So that includes the moments where we need to assess, how we are in that moment and what we think is really fitting in that particular moment. So the Dharma can't become just a thing that we mindlessly do. And that's something we really have to watch out for. Like there are always tough choices to be made. And the path of Dharma is inherently, it's challenging, like I'm thinking, just coming into my mind now, I've probably told this story before, but I've been in 3 different situations now in Dharma communities where there were problems with mice and cockroaches in the building. That's a tough situation. I mean, and if you feel like you can't exterminate in that situation, I understand where that feeling is coming from. And I think it's coming from a good place. But at the same time, what if you are the building manager and there's health code situations that need to be taken care of? You know, not to mention the fact that like mice chew through wires, you know, and they cause fires and things like that. So it's very possible if we don't do something about situations with mice or cockroaches that there could be health implications for other beings, you know. So these are complicated situations, you know, but they are really where we can grow, I think, the most. And, you know, one way I think about it is just we don't have the karma at this point to make easy choices. Like, unfortunately, it's not our situation that all of our choices are easy. In fact, a lot of them are difficult, and sometimes the most important ones are not only difficult, but not a clear win. You know, sometimes our choices don't have like the beautiful, sunny, you know, movie ending that we would like, but some choices just need to be made. So all of this to say that like it can be easy to think that we can just lean on Dharma or our new or adopted beliefs of Buddhism to be like the definitive answer, the space of certainty, you know. But we should be getting into a space that is more improvisational and present and living in some uncertainty in a way that is hopefully stimulating and realistic, you know. So so to get back to what I was thinking about bodhicitta situation, we may start a practice like this, and out of habit, I want that certainty and repetition. We begin to default to always, you know, putting others before ourselves and putting ourselves like last. But as long as we're fixated on the separation of ourselves from other beings, we're actually not acting from an enlightened perspective. I mean, we need to work with this relative perspective, but understanding that this is an impartial situation. I mean, on the more profound, ultimate truth kind of side of things, we're talking about non-conceptual, non-dual situation that's hard to even describe in words, but we can just think of it here as impartial, you know, impartial compassion, compassion that sees everyone equally, including ourselves. But as long as we don't recognize that situation, it may not be helpful in a certain moment to put ourselves down or put ourselves last. And in fact, it could be a huge impediment to our own practice. So while Lojong is a powerful remedy for self-clinging, we have to read the label, in a sense, on this bottle of medicine. And what I mean by that in this case, by reading the label, is being awake and aware to exactly what's happening in this moment, you know, what this situation is right now, or in any given moment where we want to apply these teachings. One way that we can do that is to check like our window of tolerance. Like, are we in a position to safely expand out, you know, or are we in a situation where we actually need to contract a little bit? Like, sometimes we can give, and sometimes we have to conserve or resource even. So, and this is really important because this situation of balance is also protecting our human life sometimes, you know. So we need to be aware of the fact that like not only does everybody else need to be happy and taken care of, but we need to be happy and taken care of too. And that is okay. And that's actually part of helping us traverse the path successfully. So Lojong, and in particular its principal practice of tong-len, are practices. They should be done in formal practice, meaning like on the cushion. But like any other meditation, our ability to skillfully execute them as an applied practice in daily life it's a lot harder that way. You know, like if you have tried placing attention on the breath and taking that into your workday, you know what I mean. You know, it doesn't feel the same, you know, when you're people are talking to you and you have challenges, and that's why we do formal practice, so that we can isolate the skill and isolate the ideas and really work with that alone. And then when we go into our applied practice, there's a million other variables that are happening. So we need to recognize that, like, what we do in the formal practice, on the cushion, as a lot of people say, what we do there, it's not going to be the same when we take it out into the world. Maybe sometimes, maybe when we're at our strongest or things are the least complex. But in most cases, applied practice is, we have to grade on a curve, let's say, and we can't expect it to look or feel the same as it does on the cushion. So oftentimes, out in our applied practice, simply remembering the aspiration for bodhicitta is the best thing that we can do. And maybe all we can do sometimes, but it is incredibly meaningful and important. And it's through that what we call aspiration bodhicitta, that action bodhicitta ultimately arises, and our ability to do that. So it is, and the particular reason I'm bringing this up is I can see scenarios, and I know I've been in scenarios where the best I could do is wish, that I could be enlightened and have impartial compassion in that moment, but I couldn't. And I maybe thought negatively about myself because of that. But I think it's important to note that, like, aspiration bodhicitta is good. Like, that is a very good thing. And so to think about karma again, if when we create some aspiration bodhicitta, which is actually coming from some bit of awakening, that's coming from our enlightened nature, when that comes up, that is a good thing that should be nourished. So we've got to really watch if, when something, a little sprout of awakening pops up, that we're not mowing it down. Like, it's a good thing to have the wish to help other people, even if we can't act on it in that moment. And that it's incredibly meaningful. And think of how many people in the world that just never even occurs to wish for all beings to be happy. I don't know that I ever thought about all beings being happy until I got involved with the Buddhist community. Like, that was just a thing that never even really popped into my head. I wasn't a mean person. I didn't want everybody to be unhappy, but just the idea of, like, cultivating this wish that everybody is equally happy. That's amazing that we have learned about that. Like, we are so lucky compared to so many other beings. So, but this is a big wish. It's a big aspiration. And so it needs some cultivation, and we need some patience, as well as our wishes to achieve the end result of enlightenment. We also need to be grateful for the present moment and where that brings us. So I want to jump to something else. This is a good place to pause. That was a mouthful. Any thoughts or questions about any of this?
Good stuff. I just have one comment. Oh, go ahead, Charles.
What's the book that you referred to, Lama Adam?
Oh, first was Great Path Awakening.
Okay.
But then Trungpa Rinpoche's Training the Mind in Loving Kindness and Compassion. That's the main book I'm going to be using moving forward. I've always loved this book. I feel like, I'm sure I've talked before about my love of Khenpo Rinpoche and Trungpa Rinpoche, but like, I feel a lot of times like Trungpa Rinpoche just gives this like alternate side of the coin view on things that for me just snaps things into clarity. Like, and I often felt that way about like Rinpoche's teachings. Like, they'd be incredibly meaningful, and then I would read something that Trungpa said about it, and I would be like, oh, it was almost like, I felt like it was like if you had a sculpture in your house and it was beautiful and it sat on this table and you loved it, and then somebody walked in one day and turned it like 3 inches, and you're like, oh, that's how it's supposed to be. Like, that's how I feel about when I read
So
Trungpa's
who wrote
teachings.
The Great Path to Awakening?
That is Jamgon Kongtrul, but it's translated by Ken MacLeod.
Okay.
And this is, you're welcome. Yeah, this is Lama Kathy said Rinpoche told her this book is a complete path to enlightenment. And he said, always tell everyone that they can achieve awakening just through practicing loving kindness and compassion. So I'm happy to reshare that information because there's a lot of stuff to learn, particularly in Tibetan Buddhism, but sometimes it's nice to hear like you can just use this teeny book, you know, and the incredibly profound practices.
Is that the best book for Lojong teachings? Is that what?
Yes and no. A yes is the definite answer, but one thing I would say is it is so dense and there's not a word wasted that it would always be better to go through it with a teacher. But there's another book, a third book that is much thicker by Chöling Rinpoche. That's actually what I would say is the best way to learn it. Like if you are, particularly if you don't have a teacher you're working with, what I would recommend if you're going to self-learn this, and I actually wouldn't recommend doing that, but I know people do that stuff. The Practice of Lojong by Chöling Rinpoche. I think Daniel just put it in the chat too. Yeah, the Practice of Lojong is really great, and it kind of says all the things that are unsaid in here. But one of the reasons why I love this book so much is, to me, it's like this is the essence of, you know, the oral teaching lineage, because it is difficult to unpack this without a guide, and I think that is like really good traditional way to learn.
Yeah, it's very pithy, so it's nice to have somebody to study it with. I also, we were talking about Nundro last time, and his Nundro book is quite good as well. The Torch of Certainty is quite good, so I would recommend that one too.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think there's Nundro books by each of those other authors too. Like I know there's a Chöling Rinpoche one, or maybe no, I'm thinking of Ninja Rinpoche, but I digress. Charles, did that help?
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't see they were typed in chat.
Oh, they just showed up. They
okay.
weren't there
Great.
before. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Daniel.
Daniel.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Very
welcome.
helpful. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'm excited to go through this. This is great practices. Lisa, did you have something? You still there? Well, yeah. So when you get back, just let me know. So then the first section here, so just to give an overview of the kind of layout, a roadmap of this book, Great Path of Awakening. There are 7 points, and so it's often called the 7 points of mind training. And those 7 points are the groundwork, which is instruction on what supports the Dharma, the actual practice, training in bodhicitta, the transformation of adversity into the path of awakening, the utilization of the practice in one's whole life, the extent of proficiency in mind training, commitments of mind training, and guidelines of mind training. So the first section here is going to be preliminaries. And Lisa, I see you're back. Did you have a comment?
Oh, yeah. No, that's okay. Oh, so the books, are we to read it with a teacher, or can we read that one on our own, or with you in this discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that this would be a great companion for Great Path.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
The one thing I would say with any of these things, yeah, thank you for asking. I think the one thing I would say with any of these things is if you haven't learned this before, I would say don't read ahead. Like I would say rather like whatever we cover, then go back and read, at least for the beginning, because there is a practice coming up here. And I do want to read another section related to this. There is the ultimate bodhicitta practice really needs clarification. Like you really need to talk through it with somebody. And it's the kind of thing that like I'll tell you, there are teachers that don't teach it when they teach Lojong because they're worried about misunderstandings about the practice. Now I've had teachers, many teachers that do teach it, and I've had like Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, when he taught it to us in retreat, said you cannot teach it without teaching the ultimate bodhicitta practice too. So I do feel like it needs to be shared, but like I definitely, when we do that, we'll dialogue, we'll talk about it, because there's a lot of potential for misunderstanding that.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to go over just a couple of the preliminaries today. Oh, I do want to read that one paragraph related to that. I almost forgot. So yeah, I'll just read the rest of this. So Nagarjuna said, if the rest of humanity and I wish to attain insurpassable awakening, the basis for this is bodhicitta, as stable as the king of mountains. Compassion, which touches everything, and pristine wisdom, which does not rely on duality. So compassion, which touches everything, refers to relative bodhicitta, and pristine wisdom, which does not rely on duality, refers to ultimate bodhicitta. And ultimate and relative, I always think of this in just spatially, like it really helped me to think of the fact that like, relatively speaking, we each see things our own way. Literally, like in the room we're in right now, there's one relative view we have of the space we're in, but we can imagine that there's an ultimate situation where we can see everything in the room, but at any given point in time, we have our own two eyes peering out at the world with our own experiences. And so we can only ever really see things from this relative stance, but there is this ultimate view as well. So here we're talking about everything, but to me it kind of clicked when I thought of it spatially, like in a room, my relative view compared to someone else's relative view compared to all of the relative views put together into one ultimate situation. And so Jamgon Kongtrul goes on to say, moreover, whatever accumulations of merit and wisdom we may have, the root of spiritual development in the Mahayana, the six perfections, non-abiding nirvana, and so on, is simply the arousal of bodhicitta. It arises on the basis of love and compassion. Even when full Buddhahood is attained, there is nothing to do except to work for the welfare of others with non-referential compassion. True ultimate bodhicitta will not arise in the course of experience of beginners, but relative bodhicitta will definitely arise if they train in it. With the development of relative bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta will be realized naturally. And I think that is maybe the most important sentence in this whole book. True ultimate bodhicitta will not arise in the course of beginners, a course of experience of beginners, but relative bodhicitta will definitely arise if they train in it. With the development of relative bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta will be realized naturally. And that's so important because I think the most common questions I get about this are about like, why don't I understand ultimate bodhicitta yet? but the idea is that you have to come to that through the relative bodhicitta. And as long as we're trying to understand the ultimate bodhicitta, it's not going to arise naturally. But as Jamgon Kongtrul says here in very clear terms, with the development of relative bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta will be realized naturally. So the focus in terms of our practice is primarily on the principal practice, the relative bodhicitta practice, which is tong-len. So I'm sure many people have probably learned tong-len, and we'll do that again. That's the principal practice in this whole cycle of Lojong teachings. So Jamgon Kongtrul goes on to say, for these and many similar reasons, we must meditate energetically on relative bodhicitta at the beginning if we are to achieve any meaningful results with respect to bodhicitta. For someone who wishes instruction on this subject, the basic method for training is, as Shantideva says, they who desire shelter quickly for themselves and for all others should use this sacred mystery, the exchanging of oneself for others. Consequently, only the method of meditation of exchanging oneself for others is explained in what follows. All other methods of mind training are simply elaborations of this theme. So I love those 2 pages. It's so deep. I mean, and we could go so much deeper into certain words. And I'm sure there were things that flew past that people would, are not sure about what they mean. Nine abiding nirvana, pranchika Buddhas. There's a lot of stuff mentioned here that we can do a lot of unpacking on. But I think the root idea here is that we need to work for impartial compassion, loving kindness and compassion. And that as long as we're really working with the relative bodhicitta aspect, cultivating that wish for impartial happiness for all beings, we will naturally experience the ultimate situation eventually. So then we move into the first point. So that was kind of an introductory page. And then we move into the first point, which is the groundwork instructions on what supports the Dharma. So, and it just occurred to me too, by the way, there is if anybody needs, just email me at adam@lamaadam.com. There is a PDF if anyone needs, if can't afford the book. Like there is a PDF of this book that I can share. So just let me know if you need. And if you can't afford it, it's probably good to buy it. But okay, so this is really the cool part. So the structure of the 7 points of mind trading is 59 slogans. So there are 59 slogans. These slogans are like little lines, like one sentence, maybe two sentences. They're like reminders, kind of. And the slogans are to be memorized. So as we move through here, one of the best recommendations I can give you is to make your own slogan cards. You can buy them, like you can go online and buy the 59 slogan cards, but you probably know when you studied for school, like it's better when you write them out yourself, So it's not just for memories reasons. Like I really recommend people make their own cards because you can also include whatever information you want on that card. So for instance, like my cards will have the slogan on the front, but it may also have an alternate translation of the slogan, because that's another reason why I like these different books. There's always like a little different translation, and sometimes the translation can really matter. So if there's a translation I like better, I might put that on the back. Similarly, some of these slogans are as simple as "Don't forget the three things." And it's like, well, what are those three things? Well, flip your card over and there they are, So I would really recommend as we move through, like whatever we cover, just make one of those cards, make that card. And what's neat about the slogan is that they are to be memorized. What are my notes here? Yeah, so I would say like I would work with them with the idea of like, maybe once you have more than one or two of them, work with one or two a day or one a week or something, because the idea is not to like have them handy to grab the stack whenever you need to see a certain slogan. The idea is that they become so familiar, so intimately available to you that when you meet a situation, the right slogan arises. That's what we're working for. It's not to have like a handy guidebook to flip through for what you need in a certain circumstance. It's to have these slogans so ingrained that like when something happens, you just recall the one that you need. And I can tell you that happens. Like it does happen when you work with these things for years, that it gets to the point where you just know which one you need in that moment, and it's really pretty wonderful. So again, like I'd say, make your own cards. And so yeah, I want to make sure we have one, at least practice for today. I was going to next time we'll go through the four thoughts, because one of the preliminaries here is the four thoughts. And I wanted to share, I've got a document to help you go through contemplating the four thoughts. We'll do that next time. But for today, the first thing he introduces, the first slogan, he says, as to the first point, the root text gives, first do the groundwork. So that's the first slogan, is first do the groundwork. And that's the whole slogan. And he says there are 2 points here, the groundwork for a period of meditation and groundwork instructions. And we're just going to go through, we've got just enough time to do the groundwork for a period of meditation. And so his instruction is, first, at the beginning of every period of meditation, imagine, and I'll go back and explain some of this. He says, imagine your root guru sitting on a lotus and moon seat above your head. His body is radiant and his face is happy and smiling as he regards all beings with non-referential compassion. In him, all the root and lineage gurus are present. So just to rewind a little bit, root guru That can be Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha, if you want. That can be Chenrezig. If you don't, what I'm trying to say is if you don't know immediately who your root guru in this life is, like if you haven't had the fortune to meet someone, that you connected with in that way, you can use Shakyamuni Buddha or Chenrezig or Karmapa, so Vajradhara, any of those kind of figures that resonate for you can be that figure above your head. So the idea is, imagine your root guru sitting on a lotus and moon seat. Lotus, you've seen this if you've seen any Tibetan iconography. There's a lotus with like a flat disc of the full moon on it. So he's sitting on that. His body is radiant and his face is happy and smiling as he regards all beings with non-referential compassion. In him, all the root and lineage gurus are present. So that's one of those heavy sentences, right? Because the idea is that it's not like just Shakyamuni Buddha, if that's your root guru. Shakyamuni Buddha embodies all root and lineage gurus, all the teachers, so it isn't like one. I guess the best way to say it was it's not one or many, it's all, And he says, with intense respect and devotion, repeat the lineage prayer if you wish. And the lineage prayer is in the book. But he says, in particular, the following prayer 100 or 1,000 times. So I'll say that I think many people do just this prayer because the lineage prayer is rather long. I think if you can do the lineage prayer, I think that's great. But this little prayer is maybe the most manageable. And it is, I pray for your blessing, my guru, great and completely worthy spiritual friend. I pray that you will cause love, compassion, and bodhicitta to arise in my mind. And he says that we're supposed to repeat that 100 or 1,000 times, which really just means as many times as you can in the time that you have. So we're imagining, root guru above our head. We're saying, I pray for your blessing, my guru, great and completely worthy spiritual friend. I pray that you will cause love, compassion, and bodhicitta to arise in my mind. Then you imagine the guru descends through the aperture of Brahma and sits in your heart in a pavilion of light, like an open shell. This exercise in intense respect and devotion is known as Guru Yoga. It is important to begin every period of meditation this way. So you can do that now. That's in retreat. That's what we did at the beginning of every session. We did a Guru Yoga thing. So to back up to some of these points, aperture of Brahma is a point, they say 8 finger widths back from your original hairline. So you kind of find that spot. And like right in the middle there, that's the aperture of Brahma. So when the guru dissolves into light and descends through the aperture of Brahma, he descends and sits in your heart in a pavilion of light. And again, Jamgon Kongtrul says, this exercise in intense respect and devotion is known as Guru Yoga. And yoga here means union. So I think this is like one of the most beautiful practices, it all together. And if you've done Nundro, like it's a version of this is the 4th part of Nundro. So, but it's a beautiful practice to start. And I think one of the reasons it is such a beautiful practice to start with is we work with both the relative and the ultimate view in a practice visualization way. So we start with this idea of our separateness from, enlightenment. We start with this idea of like needing, to be blessed, and receive the kinds of blessings that can help us to progress and achieve awakening. And we supplicate for that. We pray for that. And when we make a supplication like that, really there should be an attitude of really, really feeling like we need it. Supplication, maybe I'll tell a story about that another day, but supplication like really is praying for help, like not just kind of praying for help, but praying for help. So when we do that with real genuine, like, please help me, please help loving kindness and compassion and bodhicitta to arise in my mind, like I think it would be fair, maybe even just when we're sitting down to do this practice, to do what we did. If some of you were here for the meditation in the beginning, think about like today, how much more happy could I be and how much more benefit could I bring to the world if I really had loving kindness and compassion and bodhicitta present in every moment, without flickering in and out. How much just today, how much could that help me and all beings? And then sit down and say, please help me to do this, please. So we say that prayer a number of times. He said 100 or 1,000 times. I think it's good if you have the time, to at least say it enough times till you feel it, till you're really feeling it. It may take a couple repetitions to get to where you're like, oh yeah, now you're kind of moved, or something clicks a little bit. And after you say that prayer, this beautiful thing happens, which is that root guru dissolves into light, dissolves through that aperture of Brahma, comes down into your heart, and is present inside you. Like it's innate within you. There's now a union of ultimate and relative truth. There's this union of you and the guru. You're inseparable. And that's a beautiful practice. And it's a beautiful representation of, this idea of ultimate and relative truth in balance. I think another good analogy for that, it's an imperfect analogy for sure, but like, again, what we did at the end of the meditation today, like we have an anchor, but then we also have all this stuff around the anchor, and can we hold everything and one thing at the same time, with equal weight? So I think this is another sort of version of that, where we're working with this idea of this ultimate situation of inseparability with this idea of it seeming separate, and making those two things harmonize and not contradict each other. So it's a beautiful practice. It really can be the first thing you do in your practice. Yeah, any questions on that? I think that's as far as we should go for today with this stuff. I'm so grateful to be able to teach this. I love this practice.
And the slogan is going to be in the book, the second book.
So they're all in all the books. A lot of them will have them in the
okay.
text.
Okay,
but
perfect.
Usually they'll also have a section where they have just the slogans written out.
Okay.
So like in the
Okay.
back, this is an appendix with all of them.
Oh,
and you can also
thanks.
and the slogans, I don't see any harm in you Googling and getting a list of all the slogans. I would just recommend not reading. The main thing is don't read. I would ask that you don't read the practice instructions for the ultimate bodhicitta practice. That's really the main thing. But the slogans are fine, because I think, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I did in the beginning here, the slogans are kind of drip. There'll be like one slogan and a long thing and another slogan. But as we get into the book, they start to come fast and furious, and there's maybe a paragraph for each slogan. But yeah. Who here has, if I could ask, like, who has like received like the whole Lojong teachings? Has anybody? Tara? I'm so glad. That's great. I'm so glad that that we can go through this then. That's fantastic. I was really worried like, oh, they're going to be like, oh, another Lojong teaching. So I'm so glad that it's going to be fresh. That's good. And I have to say too, like, I'm so grateful that I can share not only what I learned from Temple Rinpoche and Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who are the two of the people who taught me this, but also especially Lama Kathy, because this is Lama Kathy's jam. Lojong is her jam. And so I've had a lot of opportunities to hear her teach this and work with her on this. So I'm really grateful to her, for sharing that with me, and that I can share that with you. And yeah.
I was going to say, Lama Adam, yeah, Lama Kathy came out here to California a few times and taught Lojong.
Yeah.
Good.
She taught parts of it. I don't think she went through all of the teaching. We'd have like a weekend event with her, but that is definitely Lama Kathy's jam, 100%.
Yeah, for sure.
I was at
and it's go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I was just recently at KTV for the Karma Pakshi training, and she's even referring to the great path of awakening and in us getting karma pakshi training. So yeah, I mean, she carries it around like it's there with her all the time.
Yes, I had somebody mention to me the other day, like whenever you see Lama Kathy, you'll always see a beat up version of this book, like peeking out of the top of her bag wherever she's going. Well, any questions on? I want to just double check the Guru Yoga section. Does everybody feel like they have enough to work with there? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, and this is one thing that's really amazing about this is like part of the what Rinpoche said about this being a complete path to enlightenment that may be a little surprising is there is really no deity in here. You know, it's not like there's like a Chenrezig or a, you know, Vajradhara. This is a practice that you can take all the way to enlightenment that doesn't require a meditational deity per se. And I think it's kind of unique in that way, that it is this complete path to enlightenment that I know I've even heard Lama Kathy say you can kind of, I mean, this is a loose use of the word, but like you can use Lojong as your yidam, you know, like your practice. Yidam means like that which binds the mind. And so there's a tradition in the Vajrayana Tibetan Buddhist teachings that like practitioners will sometimes take a yidam, take a particular meditational deity that they work with for a very long time or their whole life, and that particular deity or practice is what binds their mind to awakening, you know. But you can use this cycle of teachings, Lojong, to do the same thing. So there are circumstances I know where I've met with people who like they're just not comfortable with the meditational deity thing, you know, it's just not their thing. And this can be really helpful, you know, like that can be a really great way to achieve the same outcomes.
I've heard that you can just use Guru Yoga as your
Yeah.
sole practice, as you know, not a deity practice per se, but you can use it that way. I mean, for sure in the Nundro practice, the refuge and bodhicitta section, you've got the refuge tree, and then all of the refuge tree dissolves into your root guru, and the root guru dissolves into you. So there's that part. And then there's also the whole Guru Yoga at the end. So, you know, you could theoretically just do that.
Yeah, that it does. It's interesting to see the echoes of Guru Yoga in all of these practices. There's always some disillusion where that appearance of separateness becomes an appearance of unity. And I mean, really, like this stuff is so amazing. I mean, we are very lucky to have access to this type of stuff, right? Because it's pretty amazing to use our minds to simulate ultimate truth. I mean, I can't even figure out the right way to say it, but you know what I mean? Like we have these ways, these very skillful ways of kind of practicing it, you know, practicing for it or working with it from our limited relative viewpoint, you know, finding a way to sort of see through the cracks in the fence at what's really outside, you know, that's pretty amazing. Any other last thoughts? I swore I've been relying too much on my PowerPoints. I swore I wasn't going to forget to do a refuge prayer again today, but I did. So let's do 3 right now, and we'll do them as a dedication. So we'll do it. We'll do it just 3 times in Tibetan. If you don't know the refuge prayer, you can just generate the aspiration to be awake in more moments than you are asleep, and to aspire to impartial loving kindness and compassion at a minimum, and at a maximum to really try to enact that aspiration in daily life. So we'll say this 3 times. O Sangye Chidang Sukhi Chodnama Janchu Badu Dagni Kyapsuji Daki Jinsogi Pesunamki Rola Penchi Sangye Drupasho Sangye Chidan Soki Chonanga Janchu Padu Dagni Kyapsuchi Daki Jinsoki Pesunamki Drola Penchi Sangye Drupasho Sangye Chidan Soki Chonamna Janchu Padu Dagni Kyapsuchi Daki Jinsoki Pesunamki Drola Penchi Sangye Drupasho. And then let's rest our minds briefly. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So good to see you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you, Lama Adam.
Thank you, Lama Adam.
Thank you.
You.
See you again soon.
Thank you, Lama Adam.
Good
Bye.
night.
Thank you. Be well.